Los YouTube. Even as the Dreamcast was dying, Sega and Sonic Team were already beginning to pivot on where they would release our favorite little blue hedgehog, which is why in December of 2001, Sonic Adventure 2 was ported to the GameCube, and Sonic Advance was released for the Game Boy Advance. I already reviewed Sonic Adventure 2, so it would be best if I at least talk about their return to 2D Sonic as well. In my opinion, these handheld games are just as important as our 3D titles, so in the act of just keeping these videos around the same length, for today, let's tackle the Game Boy Advance tetralogy.
Sonic Advance!
Sonic Advance is a game trying to get back to the series' 2D roots, created by Sonic Team in collaboration with DIMPS. By that I mean, DIMPS themselves made the game, they put it together, but Sonic Team also had their hand in planning, designing, and oversight. The Advance series as a whole is like a missing link between the adventure era and the classics. New updated sprites for your 4 playable characters, new moves that emphasize their differences, and that's about it, to be honest. Sonic Advance is a pretty simple game to just run through and beat with a character. Our zones themes are pretty familiar, even if a few of them have their own unique quirks. You have 6 main zones, 6.5 zones you run through, and it will take you about an hour to get a run done, but digging deeper is where the fun and frustration starts to show up. If we're talking about the pure game design and what makes this game different from the 2D classics, it would be the combat that they added. Everyone has their own special attacks with the B button, but their moves leave a lot to be desired. Most of their attack moves aren't worth it outside of boss fights, and even then, I wouldn't recommend using them. All of their moves give you a bit of personality, but only Amy has the range to be useful, but she can't even attack normally in the first place, so you're kind of forced to do it anyway. She has to jump and then hit the attack button to do damage, because she doesn't spin like the others, but if you hit down an attack, she still acts like she has a spin jump in the air. Without that, on the surface, things are no different than your average classic Sonic game in terms of control, but I can at least say that all of these games are doing their best to copy the classic physics, even if all of them feel a bit heavier and stiffer than those games. This becomes very apparent with some of your new movement options. Once again, most of these new moves these characters have are pretty useless. Sonic has an air dash and a backflip, but they don't really give him distance nor stop him the way it should. But all of our old movement options that you've come to know and love have returned and work just as well, like spin dashing, flying, and gliding. Tails can swim once again, but this time Knuckles can also swim. He can tread the top of the water surface if you get high enough and just stay up there, or he can do a breaststroke like he's gliding underwater. But once again, Amy is a standout with a pretty good conversion of her 3D moveset. You can bounce on her Pico Pico hammer by pressing down and B, carrying her momentum, and if she hits a spring with her hammer, she gets sent flying the furthest out of everyone in the cast. But not being able to spin dash makes some of the loops hard to deal with, and it's like you're playing Sonic 1 all over again. And that's kind of the vibe that I get from this game. It's like you're playing Sonic 1.5 because the actual level design is closer to Sonic 2 and 3 and K. There's a good mixture of speed and platforming. Even the strength of the gimmicks is on par with Sonic 2, light and unobtrusive. Zip lines, weird flag springs, water, it's all there. The most Egg Rocket does is give you a time limit as you go up the rocket. Simple but effective. The levels even have a good size to them, being split between high and low paths. Ice Mountain Zone Act 2 being a standout with the bottom path that is submerged underwater that you can mostly skip by staying in the upper pathway. But sadly, that brings me to another problem. The Game Boy Advance screen is really small, so while some of this design would be fine on a TV, putting it on a handheld makes problems start to crop up even as early as the first level, getting shot off screen, not knowing what's below you, and something that I feel is very aggressive in this game, being stopped or sent backwards by things you couldn't see coming. Now I could be wrong, but I feel like the number of spikes used to halt your progression is at an all-time high, and for no good reason some of the time. That means when the level design starts to actually get difficult later in the game, you just might fall down a pit because you decided to spin dash at the start of the stage. God forbid you want to go fast. And then that doesn't excuse the actual awful level design that is in Egg Rocket. bounce up and down onto things that you can't really see. Now I actually hope you're going fast enough to not fall down this pit, and my favorite, leap of faith into 2 spikes with 2 gotchas back to back. I hate that part, always forget, can't see it. And then you have the bosses, and they're kinda... they range from being bland to really annoying. I thought I'd hate the underwater boss more, but he's not that bad. The carnival boss is the one that bugs me. RNG until you get lucky. And then the final boss, also annoying. You start off with this cute recreation of Sonic 1 and 2's first bosses. Can't do 3, he's a bit involved, I get that. But the real final boss is way too strict with hitting it. You get like half a second to actually attack him. And if you don't do it while he's opening up, you're definitely not doing it after he attacks and is closing up. Unless he brings out the hand. And then you do a little damage, and then once he does it again, you damage boost him with invincibility frames because it's not worth it. Why fight the boss normally when he's annoying? But that's not the true ending of this game. That's not the truly worst annoying thing of this game. This game is also the return of finding Chaos Emeralds, and someone thought, hey, the exploration aspect of Sonic 3 and Knuckles was pretty good, but that's too much work, so instead, let's have special springs in select levels. And then let's make getting to them really annoying. Now, to be honest, finding some of them is mostly a problem due to the small view window of this game, but, well, when that happens, you should be taking that into account. It's as easy as the first level because that's where the first special spring is, and you're just like, how am I supposed to get up here? How do I find this? As for the special stages themselves, I hate it. It's not inherently flawed, it's just really picky and hard to grasp space and distance. You're in a Sonic 2-like special stage where you need to collect rings and dodge bombs. If it weren't for the perspective and the hitboxes, it'd be just that simple. You can even do tricks to increase your hitbox, and you need to do it to collect certain batches of rings. It's pretty interesting. It just controls very poorly. It's Sonic Heroes all over again. But unlike Sonic Heroes, you can, quotation marks here, easily get back into the special stage after you mess it up. You won't be able to use the spring again, but if you kill yourself, then you have another chance to get back to it, and they're fairly close to the checkpoints. And while you obviously need them to get to the secret final boss, the Chaos Emeralds are shared through one file, so you know, Tails, Knuckles, go and save me please. But I also would still consider this something like guided content, because unlike Sonic 2 and 3, the way you get into these special stages are nowhere near as plentiful, but also not as straightforwardly challenging as something like Sonic 1. But once you have all the Chaos Emeralds and have beaten the game with every character, the extra zone unlocks after beating the final boss with Sonic again. And as cool as this cutscene is, the final boss is a little weird. You have to jump up and then dash into his head, which threw me off a little bit, but I got it. But I could barely get it my timing to destroy the capsules, which give you rings, and that's the only way to get them in this stage. It's a little awkward, but it's not that bad. I also played this game on easy mode for all of the other characters, which, to be honest, just reduces boss hits and removes some enemies from the levels. But nowhere near as easy as me actually cheating, because I did not kill myself to replay those special stages, if you know what I mean. But all in all, that's Sonic Advance, a fun little game, and if you aren't trying to get the real ending, the frustrations don't hit you as hard. But playing through it as Sonic the first time and forever, man, I was getting heated, knowing that I was missing things. Every little hit bothered me, and it all piled up by the end, making me feel pretty sour on my first playthrough. But swallowing my pride, using a guide for Tails and Knuckles to find those springs, and not having a care in the world for Amy on easy mode, it was pretty fun to learn those levels and go back to them, even if it did feel a bit repetitive. I say a bit, it felt really repetitive. Most levels hardly last more than 3 minutes though, but that last one can still jump off a cliff. I hate it, it's really bad. People like to call the advanced games the true Sonic 4, and while I can obviously see it, I don't think this one tops Sonic 2 for me personally, but we still have 2 more platforming games to go, so let's advance into what a lot of people consider to be the cream of the crop of the series.
Sonic Advance 2!
Sonic Advance 2. Harder, better, faster, stronger, and in my opinion more annoying, but don't forget all those good things I said. Eggman is back to doing no good, and this time he's kidnapped our friends. Oh man, I didn't even... Sonic Advance had a plot. Eggman was doing evil. We had to stop him. But this time he's kidnapped our friends and made it personal. And this little rabbit girl. And Knuckles is doing his stupid shtick. 7 zones, 4 playable characters. Let's advance. This game's greatest strength is that it's a sequel that knows what it wants to be, and it wants to be fast. You start levels getting you ready with a running start. You have a new speed boost feature where you enter it by running at top speed for a certain amount of time. That gets shorter the more rings you have. You have chasing boss fights where you auto run while dodging attacks. It gives the series a nice identity all its own compared to the first game, which just felt like a standard classic Sonic game but with cool sprites. I think now the bridge between classic Sonic and modern Sonic has been crossed. If only my problems from the last game had been fixed, but let's talk about our characters before we get to that. The boost system isn't the only new feature. Our characters have a new trick system as well. Jump off a rail or bounce off a spring and you can press the R button to do a movement action. Up, down, left or right, and backwards. Break bound by just pressing R by itself. This leans into SA2's sense of speed and want for undisturbed movement while letting you move freely in any direction. The new game system also accentuates the movement by being less stiff than the last one. Sonic's air dash actually feels better this time. Still not that much better. When you boost, your B attack keeps you moving forward with momentum for all of the characters, but normal attacks are still as worthless as they were in the last game. Except for our new playable character. New to this series is Cream the Rabbit. Designed for Sonic Heroes, but with this game also being in production, they decided that this would be her first playable appearance. If Tails is the easy mode, Cream is super easy mode because she solves the problems that is dealing with bosses. All Cream needs to do to attack is send her Chow Cheese to attack with the B button, and he will home into any target and kill them instantly. You won't really have to learn how to fight the bosses, but you'll have an easier time getting through the game as a whole. And speaking of the bosses, boy are they only a cool concept in this game. You're chasing them as you fight, which is a very cool idea, but their attacks are so perfectly timed and spaced that I hate the last 4 of them more than almost any other boss in this entire series. They're always just positioned in a way where you can't attack them. The screen is just small enough that when you do recover from attacking them, if Eggman has shot out anything in any way, you're gonna get hit. And I guess they realized running on flat land was just too easy, so they add these slopes, and they do 100% mess up your timing. It's really, really frustrating. Oh, and the infamous instant death hand can suck it. Who thought that was fine? I'm actually mad at them. I'm also mad at who thought a boss rush was also fine in the final zone, along with hidden spikes on the ceiling for the final boss. It's just really annoying and oh, luckily you can outpatience that final boss fight, so I'm not as upset as I could be. But in terms of just getting through the game, I think SA2 is a bit harder than the original Sonic Advance. The levels are bigger, their gimmicks are stronger, you have a greater sense of speed and flow. It really helps that everyone can grind on rails now, and the trick system is perfect for the hazards that they throw at you, especially when you need to use it. But once again, that doesn't mean you can always see these hazards coming. But in terms of enemy placement, I think this game is a lot more thoughtful than SA1. I don't feel like I'm being stopped as much, and if I'm being turned around, it's in an unending movement of progression, so I just need to get out of my failure loop. But because of the speed at which this game runs, when you do fall into a pit and when you do hit spikes, it becomes that much more annoying. I hate falling into the pit at the start of the stage in Sonic Advance, but at least when I fall into that pit, I'm like, yeah, it kind of makes sense this was here. In Advance 2, because these levels are so large, when you fall down a pit, you might be falling for 5 seconds, seeing areas you could have gotten to, and you're just like, really? I threaded the needle? There's a pit here? For example, in Ecutopia, there's just a spiked pit at the start of the stage, so if you're Sonic, you're just screwed for no reason and you don't get anything out of it. Why is that there? And when you try to get this collectible in Music Plant, there's this character-sized bottomless pit just standing there, and it's like, why are you trying this hard? And it's those very same collectibles that help compound this feeling, because if you want to get to the secret boss in this game, you need to get the Chaos Emeralds, and to do that, you need to collect all 7 special rings in an act, in a single run, without dying. It's really annoying and makes me wonder if playing in debug mode is a mistake during game testing. It's not, it's just that some games are better emulated than others. Jokes aside, this might be the worst way I've gotten into a special stage in a Sonic game, at least in the ones people care about. It's like Sonic CD on crack. if they wanted you to collect 50 rings and then destroy the robot machine in the past, but CD is also at least built to be ran through back and forth most of the time. This game isn't built for that. Within the level itself, you will reach a point of no return for some of these SP rings, and Sonic is the worst character to get them as, and in terms of just getting to the secret boss, he's the only one that matters. So in playing the game this way, the level design becomes way more annoying than the first one. I'm exploring, but halfway through the game, I'm falling down pits and into spike traps and then losing progress to completing the game. And then they don't even appear in a way in the upper screen to tell you if you've missed one already. I can hand it to you if you found the special springs in Sonic Advance 1. I can even believe if you found all of the special rings in Advance 2. But I'm sure most of you did what I did, and you got a guide. But even with the guide, you just can't progress too far on the stage or you won't be able to get back, so it's just an unnecessary difficulty spike in trying to get to these special stages. And on top of all of that, when you go for these rings, you have to play the level in a very specific way, restricting yourself. Its only saving grace is that you can get a Chaos Emerald in any act, but you can only get one Chaos Emerald per zone. I guess the mentality was to play as Knuckles or Tails or Cream and map out a route for Sonic, but that's just asking for too much in my opinion. If only there was this service where you could play Game Boy Advance games and they had save states and it was on a Nintendo service so I didn't have to feel bad about doing it. Wink, wink. But that's just getting to them. What about the special stages themselves? What are they like? It's hard to say if I hate them more than the first one. People call them easy, and I'd believe that if they controlled even halfway decently. My D-pad is pretty trash, but these special stages controls like you're running on butter. I got all of the Chaos Emeralds with all of the characters because I hate myself, and it's only on the 5th run that I really feel like I had control in what I was doing. You have to collect 300 rings while avoiding 0 from Sonic Adventure. The more rings you collect in a row, the higher your multiplier bonus gets, meaning the faster you get to 300, which means these special stages, in their own form, have a sense of guided content. If you have the right path, you can get them done in seconds, God willing you can control yourself, but that also means you're stuck running around for about a minute and a half with your emeralds in your hands, trying not to get hit by the world's slowest robot. He only really becomes a threat in the later stages where you have to brake more and make tighter turns, so he has a higher chance of catching up to you. I don't like anything about these stages. It feels like how everyone else describes playing Sonic 3D Blast, so I can at least finally empathize with you, I guess. But before getting to the secret boss, what else does getting all the Chaos Emeralds do in this game? Well, you need to collect them all and beat the final zone boss with your character to get it, which means if you get the emeralds after the fact, you have to fight the final boss again, even as Sonic, the boss in the final zone, not the secret one, so unnecessarily redundant and picky. But for your effort, after the first time, you get the Tiny Chow Garden. It's a fun little mini game that you can connect to Sonic Adventure 2 Battle and do chow racing stuff, and I don't have my cables at all to do any of this. I can't even charge my Game Boy Advance SP, which would give me a chance. Can't do it, I'm sorry. But after 2 characters, you get the sound test. The sound test in the first game was Amy Rose with maracas. This time, it's Cream with the tambourine, performing for you. It's very cute. 3 characters in and you get a boss time attack mode, so a waste of a slot. And after you get the Chaos Emerald with all 4 characters, you unlock Amy Rose. I don't know why they put her this deep into the game. I think most of the time, when you unlock a character like this, you expect some sort of asset reuse hard mode, but Amy is just as designed as everyone else in this game, just as many new sprites, reworked to actually be able to spin dash and spin jump. She even has a custom rail jumping trick like Sonic does. She's a fully realized character, why isn't she on the box? The US manual doesn't even try to hide the fact that she's here. I feel like they didn't know how to pad this game out, so Amy is just pushed to the end. But getting to the supersonic boss fight in this game is just the same as SA1, except the want for more padding restricts you from having an easier time at getting to the Chaos Emeralds. Beat the game as every character and get all the Chaos Emeralds as our Blue Hedgehog, and you get to True Area 53. Eggman kidnaps Cream's mom for some reason and then goes into space for some reason. This plot doesn't matter, I'm just here for the ride, and I don't like the ride. I don't like this boss fight. It wants to be Sonic 3 and Knuckles so bad, but the screen is too small and you have to hit the rockets back instead of, letting them follow you into Eggman like in that game, so their movement is really erratic and really annoying. Eggman has this freeze ray that just wastes your time, and it's awful. Either way, you destroy the boss, save Cream's mom, and we're off to our next adventure. At its base, at its core, I think Sonic Advance 2 is a really good sequel. The stages are bigger, the backgrounds are brighter and more detailed, the speed is faster, and our characters move better than ever, but like most things, the completion leaves a lot to be desired, and the repetitiveness hits you twofold with bosses that I really can't stand. I did that whole Nintendo Online bit, and while I would gratefully accept that, what these games really need is an Origin Styles collection that just zooms the camera out and cleans up a little bit of weirdness that this game has. Honestly, I think if you zoom the camera out, that probably fixes a bunch of this game by itself. But that's besides the point. Now we can easily go into Sonic Advance 3, but if you're this far in, I don't think you'd back out now. So instead, let's go in release order by advancing into the Sonic battle.
Time to party!
Okay, time to fly! Let's see what you got.
Stone fists!
Hello there! I won!
Didn't even break a sweat.
Obviously, this is going to take up most of the video, so please use the timestamps however I decide to cut this up. It should be around like SA, SA2, Battle, SA3. if you haven't picked up the joke in the script yet, here it is, plain text. But for all intents and purposes, the Advanced series can easily be seen as canon, and Battle slots in as the third entry, but to our main 3D canon, it doesn't really fit in quite as snugly as the rest of the Advanced series, but to be fair to this game, it's only the fault of one specific character. Sonic Battle is the first internally developed Sonic fighting game, a sprite-based arena fighter where basic attacks are shared throughout the cast of 9 standard characters and 1 personalized custom character, 3 special attack types that are then again split between being on the ground or in the air, creating a rock, paper, scissors mechanic where you auto-block the one that you didn't choose. You fight for KO stocks from anywhere between 1v1 to a 4-person free-for-all, but for as neat as that is, the thing people remember the most is the story mode, 8 chapters focusing on a different character as they all try to figure out the mystery of the robot left on the beach. The titular Hedgehog himself is our first selectable character, but we start the story watching as Eggman gets fed up with a mysterious robot. Having created controllable copies, he decides to litter it on the beach. Sonic just happens to be the one to find it. He tries to take it to Tails, but he runs into Shadow, who seems to know what this robot's deal is. Too bad he's short on patience and words, and becomes our first fight to get us used to this game. Now that forced interaction is done with, he leaves, telling us not to let Eggman get his hands on that robot. We meet Tails, run some tests, do some tutorializing, and we find out that the robot gets stronger with Chaos Emeralds, which it already has one of. They decide to find Knuckles, the resident Emerald Master, but run into a familiar robot who isn't who they think it is. But after talking to and obviously scrapping with Knuckles, we receive a Chaos Emerald and the robot seems to be able to speak better. Now, while that was very short and simple, I think in terms of character writing, Sonic Battle is probably the best in the entire series. It lends itself to that title by being a simple, centralized story with fairly low stakes until the very end. This game, more than any other, shows you a look at your characters' daily lives, and you get to see them being in their normal as much as possible. Sometimes it's for the best, while other times it can be a bit much because certain character traits get to be more prominent without the distraction of an active ongoing plot. Obviously Sonic has to go first, and luckily you'll see him around in other stories, so this one gets to be pretty light. It's tutorial mode where they teach you such moves as a heavy attack and a rising attack. You get to play with the main gimmick of story mode, which is building up your robot, Emerald. You get cards of the character moves when you fight and battle together with them, and then you equip the ones that you want. But what card you get is random, and each have their own use cost dictated by the number of stars on the top. Each star is worth 5 points, so you'll be getting more cards than you can use at the start of the game. But other than that, our first chapter is all about setup. I may have mentioned the Gamma-like robot sent by Eggman, but Rouge also shows up wanting to know about the special robot. We even run into the Phi cloned Emerald robots pretty early on. Phi robots. Phi from robots. Anyway, the table is set for our game to advance. Tails' story is focused on him wanting to figure out what makes Emerald tick, especially after having his computer blow up after plugging him into it. They go to the central lab after getting a pass from Rouge. He finds out that Emerald is an ancient weapon with the ability to not just learn fighting techniques, but also absorb weapons, called a Gizoid and found by Professor Gerald Robotnik. The experiments went out of control as it looped its learning function indefinitely and grew way too powerful, forcing them to seal and hide it away. Tails and Emerald are booted out before they can get more information. Their path back to Emerald Town is blocked by guard robots, so they take the long way around through the highway and run into Shadow. Now that he's rested and the plot has moved forward, he's a bit more reasonable with his assertion to destroy the deadly robot. But Tails refuses, and the two fight until Rouge interrupts them and takes the still injured Hedgehog away. They meet up with Knuckles, but are separated by the return of fake Gamma, and the Echidna lets the two make their way to Sonic alone, where they share their findings. Rouge also corroborates with Tails, but Sonic doesn't seem too bothered by this information, thinking Tails can just reset Emerald, but it's not that easy. Rouge tells them that that can only happen after they collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds and give them to him, but she doesn't know the exact details on how to do it. It's figured out that Emerald only listens to people after getting permission from a master, and Sonic gives Rouge permission, but she decides to come back to play at a later date. Tails' story is all about finding out secrets, so the rest of the game can mostly be about the characters. It takes a while for us to touch back onto these points, so it's nice to go ahead and get them out of the way now. As for the Fox Boy himself, he's pretty much where he needs to be after the events of SA2, willing to go out on his own but still calling out for Sonic when things go a little wrong. This game really plays up his childishness, but it does so without messing up his character. In fact, by the end of this chapter, he's the only one taking any of this information seriously, as Sonic and Knuckles mess around without a care in the world. But getting back into the gameplay, it really sets in how repetitive this game is. It was already demonstrated in the first chapter, but this puts it in the story as well. You have to fight for KOs, and different battles have different counts. Most of the time, you'll be fighting for 5, but then after winning that match, they put you right back into it, wanting you to aim for 10. I get the feeling that they want each fight to feel like a round in a fighting game, but it more so feels like a first to 2 matches, and then doubling the count also makes it feel more tiresome than it needs to be. And then the story decides to pad itself out as well, as you fight Knuckles for no reason. You could have just ran into Knuckles and then had the fight with Chaos Gamma. We didn't need another fight with Knuckles. Maybe they just wanted a way for you to get more cards, but it just feels like too much padding. But advancing to the next chapter, we are now running with Rouge. The story opens up 3 days prior, on her getting a mission from the president to find out about the Gizoid stolen by Dr. Eggman. She's given a pass to the central lab, where her first action is to look up ways to steal treasures from museums, but luckily, Eggman has logged in remotely first and is taking up the login space. She confronts him about the Gizoid that he's already tossed, and after battling a copy, she decides to do her job. She also finds out the things that Tails found in the last chapter, but she decides that she can use it for her own benefit and use the robot to steal instead. The story can be completely unserious at times, but that's also why I like it as much as I do. In the present, Sonic dodged Amy by leaving Emerald with her, but Rouge takes this as an opportunity to take him by force for herself. She kidnaps the robot and returns to her club at the Night Babylon, where we fight off Amy once more and then do some special training. But now we're ready to steal a Chaos Emerald at the Emerald Town Jewelry store. But first we have to fight off a delusional Amy one more time. But after that, the Emerald is for the taking. And by that, I mean Emerald's taking, because he takes it from Rouge, and the only thing she's left with is a battle between her, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and she throws in the towel and just goes home for the day. See? Completely unserious. But I do love seeing Rouge in her off hours, and I like that she's always trying to fulfill her desires at the expense of everyone around her. Her saving grace is that she's only committing Well, theft of an emerald would be grand larceny, but at least no one's getting hurt, and those things don't stay in one place for long anyway. In terms of gameplay, however, we get some special conditions for fighting. Win within a time limit, don't get KO'd once, don't get hit once. Don't get used to these. It's only in this chapter and one other place that has stipulations like this, but I do find it funny that in the don't get hit challenge, there's a glitch where you can quit out and it counts as passing. It almost feels intentional until you remember there are situations where you can't quit out of a fight and it just hard resets and drags you back into it. Either way, I think it's a fun little chapter, but a bit annoying if you don't have the right set of abilities. In Amy's little delusional fight, she manifested an imaginary Sonic the Hedgehog to fight us. That's pretty strong. Next up is Knuckles, and he feels that Sonic can't do a good enough job training Emerald on his own, so he'll go down there and do it himself. The news interrupts their training to tell them about Eggman's copy robots committing crimes around Night Babylon. Knuckles and Emerald go deal with them while making a bit of a mess themselves, but they manage to collect pieces of the Chaos Emeralds from the robots. Tails says that if they can get more, he can put them back together, and lo and behold, Eggman shows up to give them the chance and they succeed. But with Eggman cornered, Knuckles decides to try and finish things up once and for all, but falls into one of his traps again. Emerald saves him all on his own, and they fix and collect another Chaos Emerald, and it's all fun and games as we tease Knuckles for falling into another trick. Once again, short and sweet, so I have to reiterate, if you can't get into these characters just messing around, this story mode might not be for you, but I do think it's very endearing. The joke of gullible Knuckles is kinda played out nowadays, but this was back when it was still prime real estate. But outside of forced battles and other chapters, I think they play well in this one. Knuckles is just trying to do something good, but his intentions get misinterpreted when he brings a similar looking robot to the places that were robbed. And it also highlights some annoying gameplay quirks that this game does have. When searching for a missing emerald, you can fight Copy Fi robots. When Emerald fights these, he gets extra skill points, so it's really nice for him, but when Knuckles fights them, he gets nothing, and it's a waste of time. Even then, fighting them doesn't give you character cards, so after a while it will become pointless, and in this chapter specifically, it's used to waste your time. But back to the characters themselves, for Knuckles he once again is tricked, but instead of just being kinda stupid, it plays into his hot-headed and headstrong nature and his sense of right and wrong. This is probably peak Knuckles writing that we haven't seen in a while. Emerald is also starting to come into his own as a character as we give him more emeralds and he's able to express himself better. Each of these characters give a piece of themselves to make up who Emerald will become, and that sentiment starts to pay out here with how Knuckles calls him his partner, but also jokes about the way he's learned how to talk and how he can't keep a secret. It's funny. But next up, we have to continue a story that we kind of already started previously in Rouge's chapter. It's with Amy. Just like how Knuckles may be peak dummy in this game, Amy is peak manic Sonic fangirl. While she is completely in the right for trying to get Emerald back from Rouge in that chapter, she does so under the idea of the robot pretending to be a baby for her and Sonic while trying to play pretend house. And while that's still fine with Rouge in that chapter, she's a bit domineering with everyone else too. I really think they should have given her a different angry sprite to use. Though it is funny when Emerald mouths off and Sonic disengages with the entire situation because he knows he's in the wrong. But now it's just the two of them, and Amy takes this as a test by Sonic to see how good of a mother she can be. Delusional. But also get more emerald shards. But we need to head home first and check on Cream and do a bit of boxercising. Cream tells us that Amy started doing this to get stronger to protect Emerald because of that ass whipping Rouge gave her, but after finding out it's also a good way to lose weight, she's been pushing it a bit too hard. The girl is even having trouble standing straight. But just when you think we're about to have a very special episode, Amy takes off weights she's been wearing to keep going. And even though it seems like she reached her limit, Amy still goes with Emerald to Night Babylon to get more emerald shards and to get her run back on Rouge. And just like last time, we get Tails to fix up these emeralds, and just like last time, Sonic runs away from Amy. Next to Knuckles, Amy's story is probably the most comedic. The problem is I think a lot of people don't find the joke of Amy's family delusions funny. She can come off a bit overbearing about the whole thing, but to be honest, I find it amusing because there isn't really any harm meant by it, and everyone plays along with the joke sooner or later, and the one in question, Emerald, is taking it seriously. Even the weight loss bit can be seen kinda weird with the way it's writing, but I think the joke is held up by her literally losing weight. And her dialogue with the Fri robots is funny. But if there's one nice thing to see, it's the consequences of your own actions. The only reason Amy started trying so hard is because we beat her ass as Rouge, so it's nice to play as her when she gets her payback. A lot of people look back on Amy and cringe and say they mishandled her character after Sonic Adventure, but look past all the good stuff because some repetitive joke. People look back on Sonic Adventure 2 and say they wasted Amy, and I guess I can agree with that, but I also feel like her being in that game at all means someone liked her well enough. She was gonna beat up Sonic to marry her? It's a joke. It's so unserious. They were looking for Sonic in that game in the first place. Shadow wanted to fight Sonic for no reason, and he doesn't even know who a Sonic the Hedgehog is. She's super annoying. Yep, that's the joke. You cannot like it. But Amy is, and always will be, someone who will put her friends first and do her best to help them, even if she's a little delusional while doing it. That hasn't changed. Ever. But our next chapter focuses on Cream. It's a simple plot of her and Emerald getting kidnapped by Eggman, but Cream doesn't like to fight, and seeing Emerald take delight in hurting his opponent doesn't help. But after seeing him not fight to try and keep her happy, she realizes that she has to gather up her courage to help break them both out as well. After a quick training session, the two work together to take out Chaos Gamma and break out all by themselves, ruining Eggman's plans for using them as bait for Sonic. The plot's pretty light, but it's a great character chapter. Cream's characterization here is interesting. The only thing they had to go on was Advance 2, where she's willing to go and fight to save her mom, or help her mom. Advance 2 is confusing, but that doesn't matter. And the basic plot from Sonic Heroes, which wrapped up production alongside this game, where she's pretty much the same. And possibly full tinfoil hat here, they got some cues from Sonic X's production as well. The Sonic X angle is pure conjecture, but I'm gonna take a guess that they leaned heavily into that interpretation of the characters because it would fit this game's setting the best. So that means Cream is a non-combatant from the get-go. Sure, she'll box her size with Amy, but she doesn't like hurting others, even if they are deadly robots. As for Emerald, it would make sense that he could go too far when the only other people he's been fighting are ones who can handle him. It's mostly been just a game to him up until now, but Cream shows him restraint, but he still doesn't know how far to go with it. They both have to teach each other different types of limits and how to deal with them, and it's pretty sweet overall. He learns sadness, and he doesn't want to see the small rabbit cry. But now, it's about time for the plot to kick back in. It's Shadow's chapter, and it's the penultimate accumulation of all of our plot threads up until now. It shows how before the game started, he was being called out by the Gizoid itself. He found his way into Eggman's lab, and luckily ran into Rouge, who gave him intel on the robot, but they are ambushed and he took heavy damage. But that isn't going to stop him from dealing with the Gizoid. He tried getting up twice, with Sonic and with Tails, but only now, days later, has he fully recovered. Putting everything into context, he thanks Rouge for taking care of him and goes and confronts Sonic himself. After the two have a serious talk, it's decided that Shadow will be looking after Emerald, trying to better understand him, while also trying to gather more information on Eggman. But instead of him, they find Rouge in the Gimme shelter. They find out that Professor Gerald gave both Shadow and Emerald a metaphorical heart based on Maria's personality to make up a bit of their own. They also found out the password, so Shadow gives up his Chaos Emerald to the robot and says the phrase, "Bring hope to humanity." And everything seems to have worked out. But we're still playing a video game, and Shadow gives Emerald one last challenge: defeat all the other characters in battle, then come back and see him and settle things once and for all. But leave it to Sonic the Hedgehog to join in at the very end to give you a really frustrating final challenge fight against the both of them. I paraphrased this completely on plot beats alone, and I think this is some of the best character writing in the whole series. The only problem is, at the time of it was being written, it didn't really fit into the overall canon because LOL in Sonic Heroes, like I said, Shadow forgot everything, and in this game, he very clearly remembers everything that happened in Sonic Adventure 2, everything that happened on the Ark even, and it's only now that that stuff is being referenced again, that this game is being really fully referenced again. and I will never get over how funny it is that this game takes place after Heroes. It will never not be funny to me, and it will always be Shadow's fault. But dumb canon stuff that doesn't matter aside, that sentiment that I spoke of in Sonic Adventure 2, what would Shadow do if his memories weren't altered by Gerald? This game pretty much gives me that answer. He'd do anything to not have that tragedy happen again. So I guess if Shadow was only sealed away on the Ark, Sonic Adventure 2 wouldn't have happened. Maybe he'd try to go into the Ark and kill the Bio Lizard, just in case, but only maybe. But it's not just that. Shadow is carrying a lot of guilt over what happened 50 years ago, and probably Sonic Adventure 2 as well, and projects that onto Emerald. He believes he's just as much a weapon as Emerald is, and the world would be better off without them. But because he was designed to have a heart, he's in turmoil over that fact and tries to deny it. For as harsh and single-minded as he comes off as at the start of the game, he did indeed try to form a link with Emerald at the beginning, and every time he runs into a character afterwards, he actually talks to them. To me, a well-written Shadow is one who respects Sonic the Hedgehog even if he doesn't agree with him. So while the start of the game is a bit forceful, he leaves Emerald in Sonic's capable hands. He tries to reason with Tails, and while he's a bit rude, he listens to and is very thankful for Rouge. And at the end of it all, he's able to accept himself and Emerald as beings with hearts and free will openly. Well, as openly as his thin layer of edge will allow him to be. And I think he has just the perfect amount of it in this game. So begins our path to ruin. Sure it does, champ. And what does Shadow get for going through this pretty nice character arc? Well, he's able to use his Chaos abilities innately now. All that Chaos snapping and warping and Chaos Spears without a Chaos Emerald, that comes from this game. He just can't do big warpies and time stops without one. But he can still fight like he always has. As for Emerald being a reflection in this chapter, it's perfect for him. He's everything Shadow wants to be, even if this robot is actually compromised, unlike our edgy little hedgy pal. While they both may have Maria's heart, Emerald also has the hearts of all the other characters we've played with until now, so the addition of Maria's doesn't feel kind of tacked on or forced as a way to make him act as a good person. It's all about giving them free will and empathy, something we've already witnessed in the past chapters, even if he's made mistakes. So it's nice that in this chapter, his arc of becoming a real boy also comes to an end. But not this game though, we still got things to do, which leads us to the final chapter, Emerald's chapter. Eggman has completed his final weapon and has one last gambit to take the Gizoid back once and for all. He confronts our heroes and tells them to meet him aboard his new Death Egg. Tails sets up a transporter, but he can only send one person at a time, and they let Emerald confront him to get some closure on Eggman, who started this whole plot. He gets in his thanks for waking him up and takes Eggman down, but the Doctor still fires off his weapon, taking out distant stars. This overwhelming show of power activates something in Emerald. His original programming starts to kick in, bypassing Gerald's overwrite, but Eggman isn't able to control him. The robot's power looping protocol has caused it to go haywire, and it plans to destroy the Earth with the weapon. Sonic decides that he's the one who has to stop him, and Tails tells him that fighting him will probably result in Emerald's destruction, but he does what he has to do, hoping that in the end, things could change. However, they don't. Emerald is destroyed, but he'll live on in the Chaos Emeralds and in their hearts. And maybe one day, when there are no wars or need for weapons, they'll see Emerald again. What a pretty heavy ending for a pretty light game, but I guess that's where it would hit the hardest, wouldn't it? I don't hate it, but it seems so bitter and there's not a lot of sweet to it, other than Emerald being able to say goodbye to everyone and how much he appreciates them, but that's just a drop. But that is the end of Sonic Battle. I kinda stopped describing the game when I got to Cream, because I really got into the story, but after Rouge, there's really nothing the game can surprise you with. The problems and issues I brought up once again compound themselves depending on what chapter you are in, and show up as early as chapter 1. For instance, Cream's chapter is self-contained to one area, and you'll only be getting her cards and a couple of Gammas, but because she chooses not to fight for the first couple of battles, you're only getting skill points for those fights. And it's moments like these that remind you that you have to have a build for Emerald that's not too strong, or you're going to have an annoying fight on your hands when you have to fight him. Thankfully, this game gives you 3 loadouts to use that you can switch between. The game also kinda warns you if you might have an emerald battle coming up, because typically you'd go somewhere and then they go back to the map screen and then you have to click in again. It's really clunky with how the story wants to tell itself, but I get why it's there. And then some lines are just a little... I had to second guess myself in a couple of places, like Sonic and Shadow's chapter going, "Huh, you'll never beat me, go try fighting someone else and then come back." But no, you just need to beat Sonic once like everyone else before you go to Shadow. And I think the worst thing out of all of it is that any battle that doesn't have Emerald in it kind of feels pointless. The end of Rouge's chapter is unnecessarily annoying, a 3-on-1 fight for nothing. Like, I get it, you want to tell a story, but Oh, and then on top of all of that, the game just blatantly cheats. And it's not just the normal reading your input kind of way. They modify how much damage and health a character has depending on the fight, and I don't need a buffed Sonic and Shadow pushing my butthole in. It's already 2-on-1. And just like every other fighting game, that can just lead you into playing the game in the most boring, safest way, just not to die. You'll just end up looping one of your attacks ad nauseum. As for the skill point system, while not the worst, I don't think it's as good as it could be. Skill points are determined by how well you do in battle. You'll always at least get 1 with Emerald in the battle, and if you win without getting knocked out, you get 2. If you win without taking a hit, you get 5. And if there is a battle with more than 1 fee, an extra one will give you an extra point. Chaos Emeralds give you 10 points, and you can replay chapters, so grinding it out isn't the worst thing in the world. In fact, I reached about 200 points on my first normal playthrough, and I only cheated enough to win. When I did the second time and I was cheating to min-max the system, I maxed out by chapter 3, 4. But I think the real problem of this game is the card system and its RNG mechanics, because after 2 playthroughs, I feel like I should have more than 50% of the cards. I really think they should have made it so cards don't repeat, but these cards are meant to be traded between your friends. But also, if I'm getting the same card 5 times, maybe their skill point costs could at least go down. It just makes getting the same card feel bad and a waste of time. And then there are rare cards. Rare cards can show up at any time and can be anything, even unrelated character cards. Sonic wasn't even in that fight and I got his card. They span from special attacks, modifying character strength, defense, and movement, to colors or even just a fighting pose, but even those can be special. For example, a fighting pose changes Emerald's eye color, but Gamma's also gives him the self-destruct function after being KO'd. Let's actually analyze the game mechanics, because that'd be neat. At face value, you'd think most of these characters played the same, but just like, let's use for example Super Smash Bros, their movement and slight differences are what make them shine. For example, Shadow is faster than Sonic, but Sonic can stop faster than he can. Tails' heavy attack has a large radius around him, but Shadow's have a lingering hitbox. Everyone's pursuit attack is pretty similar, but you have to actually time Shadow's because his dives at a weird angle. All of these things need to be put into perspective of building up your bot. Beyond just the speed and power, these little quirks also come into effect with how many skill points they cost. For example, Amy's air action is fantastic. It's a double jump. I originally thought of it as Amy's second jump, but it actually doubles whatever jump skill you have activated. In terms of getting cards though, I say I was pretty lucky. I got Shadow's heavy attack in chapter 2, Amy's double jump, Cream's heal, and a rare Sonic Air power card. But that was to balance out by me only getting 2 special attack cards for most of my run. But if you're desperate for a guaranteed rare card, there's a fighting simulator that gets unlocked in Emerald's story. Get to the end of a set number of fights without getting KO'd to get one. It's weird because as you keep going, the KO numbers go up and up and up. While your KO numbers also go up, you still can't die, so it's just a shorthand to tell you what level you're on, and it keeps getting longer. But at least after 5 rounds, you get cards of whoever fought in that match with you, even if they are represented by the Fee robot, and there is still a chance to get a rare card during those, which means they could have done that this whole time to make normal grinding easier. It's always something. Then there are the multiplayer modes and the mini games that I can't try out. I don't really mention them because this game rubs them in your face as you unlock them for beating story mode. You can play Minesweeper with Knuckles by yourself. Gotta restart the video game to get back to the main menu, but whatever. But there's an actual arcade mode if you feel inclined to play the game for the sake of just having fun. A training mode to practice your moves, and that's pretty much it. But even if the story is the main draw of this game, first and foremost, this is a fighting game, a two-player experience, so let me dig back into that just one more time to suss out something, even if I am playing it by myself. With the stuff that I was doing, I imagined that if I was playing this against another person, this game could get a little deep. Like any fighting game, no matter how difficult to play with others, I'm sure there is a tier list and I think Cream is somewhere near the top. But on a person-to-person level, there's so many choices being made in any interaction. If you aren't on it, your 3-hit combo into heavy attack can be dropped and then blocked, GG's get blown up. But it's the pursuit mechanic that starts with the mind games. If they don't hit the wall, you have the advantage to do anything you want, be it chase them and attacking from the air or waiting on the ground. If there is a wall, you need to watch out if they counter or not, and do you delay your dash? Do you not go at all? Will they attack from the air? Will you reposition yourself? What special did they pick? Will you auto block their attack, filling up your Ichikoro gauge, or will you take the hit, filling up your Ichikoro gauge? I just wanted to say it twice. When it's full, you do an insta-kill, but if they block it, theirs fill up all the way, so you have to be careful. I haven't seen top tier Sonic Battle versus content, but I know it's there. I can feel it. So Sega, just give it to us. Re-release this game. Make a new fighting game, pick one. But I just talked about something that I think most people don't care about. Let's talk about something a little bit more superficial, like the sprite work. I think it's fantastic. The new character sprites fit in so well with the others and in the advanced style altogether. It really brings home the cooperation the past games had, which means I can't believe Sonic Team did this all on their own, to be quite honest. Once again, pure conjecture, tinfoil hat time. You don't just go make a fighting game all by yourself and taking assets from Dimps. You know, a company made by people who left SNK, who worked on a bunch of fighting games, and then continued to make fighting games for other companies. I think they had a deal where they could contract people to work for them, and they had just enough to not be able to credit the whole company, but not in a spiteful way, but a very circumstantial, just under the line, we only need like 5 guys kind of way. Taking off our funny hats, I think I like this overall soundtrack the best of the games on the Game Boy Advance. You know, it's a very scratchy, dirty vibe. It literally has disc scratches in it, and I think that leans into the GBA sound trip the best out of all the series. A lot of the music is more contemporary and fits the city aesthetic this game is going for, but there are some tracks that give you the advanced game style with themes like Amy's Room. At its core, I think Sonic Battle is a fantastic idea that should be revisited, whether it be an actual fighting game or this type of low-stakes character-driven narrative that we have, especially after something like Frontiers and now Shadow Generations coming out. But don't bring back the repetitive and frustrating parts of this game, you can leave that alone.
Sonic Advance 3!
And finally, last but not least, the SA3 everyone's been waiting for. The finale of our 4-game series, Sonic Advance 3. And what can I say about this game? A lot of people hold up Advance 2 as the best, but for me, Advance 3 is the peak of this series. While not better than Sonic 3 and K in my personal opinion, I feel like it's something comparable. Eggman has gone and broken the world into multiple pieces, blah blah blah, the story doesn't matter. What does matter is that Sonic and Tails will go and stop him with the return of 2 characters on the screen again. You can also do this in the original Advance with a cheat code. It's pretty neat, but whatever, it's not the same. In this game, you can interact with Tails all by yourself. Hold the R button and you get to do a special tag action both on the ground and in the air. And that is our gimmick, pairing up with 5 different characters to get different moves and abilities. For example, if Tails is the partner character, it's all about getting height, and it plays well into this game's stronger focus on platforming. SA3's level design is a nice mix of the first 2 games, not too fast and not too slow. If this game does one thing, it adds more crushing situations, but to be honest, that was really the only thing missing from the last 2 games, and it's only really a problem in the 3rd zone. But it's in the 2nd zone where we meet our first unlockable characters, Knuckles, who I didn't get because Sonic wasn't the leader of the party. It's annoying that it's designed like this, but I guess your tip is that every other zone you fight Emerald. No, wait, it's Gemerald in the 3rd act. Eggman seemed to have found and fixed up our lost friend from the last game, and just like there, they get stronger with each battle. But so do we as we unlock more characters and abilities that work both ways. This game puts characters into 3 types like heroes, speed, fly, and power, but that doesn't really matter. Power is the only one that I think really matters in terms of basic gameplay because there are unbreakable blocks, but if Knuckles is there, you don't really gotta worry about them anyway. And on top of that, not all pairs are made equal. For example, Sonic is kind of a bland partner, only granting this speed boost for a tag action, so if their natural abilities don't get a boost, he's kind of boring. For example, he's kinda awful partnered with Knuckles, but he's great paired with Amy. Amy, for example, removes everyone's spin jump, making them closer to how she controlled in SA1, but it's a choice of giving up attacking for more height with her tag actions. She's a stage and boss dependent type of character, but she's perfect when paired up with Sonic or Cream. Heck, Sonic gives her the best air dash in the series. But then there are some real stinkers like Sonic and Knuckles before, but also Tails isn't able to fly with Knuckles as his partner, or Cream isn't able to fly with Tails as her partner. But if you switch them the other way around, Knuckles is great with partner Tails and Tails is great with partner Cream. This mechanic is such a unique and standout feature that I've been waiting for it to make a comeback, and the best we've gotten is Sonic 4 Episode 2. Everyone's specialities and personalities are out in full force, and to be honest, I think it's comparable to Sonic 3 and Knuckles because it really hasn't been like that even in these advanced type games. I mean, Knuckles jumps the same height as Sonic, so Sonic's just a worse everyone else. And he still kinda is, but there are some team combinations that really help him shine whether he's leading or following. And I think one of the best things about it in this game is that it's for you, the player's style, because you don't have to beat the game 4 times anymore. Everyone is running in the same campaign. But I wish getting all the Chaos Emeralds wasn't the same guided content that it's always been. But before we dive into that, let's set up our stages some more. So in this game, everyone is on the same file. You pick who you want to start the game out with and you move into the hub world for each of the zones. I really like this. While I would enjoy it if they put a classic stage select in here, the hub world gives you the freedom to tackle any act you want in any order that you want without always having to do one long run through even after you've beaten the game. This hub also lets you test out what your combinations do before you even enter a stage, which is something that I've always liked. You can even find mini games and get extra lives like kill all the enemies or hit all the switches. The switches one is the easiest even if both of them are way too short on their timers. But now on to getting the actual Chaos Emeralds this time around. If you run into the Sonic Factory and go to the left, you'll find a Chow Garden. In this game, there are 10 Chows spread across every zone. If you press the select button, the game will tell you where you can find all these Chows, such as what act they're in, or if they're in the hub area itself. I want to say that the dots are in the order of where they appear in the stage, but with how some of these stages are designed, sometimes going left instead of just holding right, the readability can be a bit wonky, but this system is still leaps and bounds better than SA2. In this game, once you've found a Chao, it's collected forever and instantly saved on your file. Getting all 10 Chao then allows you to unlock the SP keys in the levels. Once you have the key, you can then head to the special spring in the hub area, and then you get sent into the actual special stage. This time you're on the tornado collecting rings in a perspective even closer to Sonic 2. You can move left and right, but this time you can also move up and down, while dodging bombs, jumping on gray enemies to get more rings, and flying through boosters to get your ring multiplier. This is hands down the best special stage in the Advanced series, yet it still combines everything we've done up until now, but it controls great, the view is great, and they're just hard enough to get you to try. Now, if we take every other aspect of our past special stages into account, this one is still by far the most tedious one to get. Our levels are just as, if not slightly larger than the game before us, and then you have to run through stages multiple times even after finding all of the 10 collectible Chao. Though you can quit out of a stage once you've found one, and if you found your last Chao in a stage, the SP keys spawn immediately and you can get that in the same run. But even if this is the most work you have to put in the whole series, I still like it the best. I think getting to all of these special stages on your own is a pain in the ass. Even if SA1 is the easiest, its special stages are the worst. Everything about SA2 is awful, so even if it's tedious, I'd rather pick the one that has something that I think is genuinely fun in it. But what happens once you collect all the Chaos Emeralds? You have to fight the final boss again, and speaking of bosses, they're also a mix of our previous games. They're not too bad, but the instant death pits are a bit too much. I'm already in an area where getting hit scatters my rings off screen. I don't need death pits too. They give you cream last for a reason. But on to the secret boss, Gemerald goes out of control and it's up to Sonic and Eggman to stop him. Non-aggression is a great name for an okay final boss. It's a little easy. You dodge attacks while using your tag action as Eggman to open up his weak point. The longer you charge, the longer it stays open, and you dash in as Sonic like every other time to do damage. But after all is said and done, we've saved the world once again and are ready to run off into yet another adventure. As the credits roll, we see Gemerald wash up on the beach shore like an emerald before him, but this time he's found by Cream. Tails fixes him up and it seems he decides to stay with Cream. If you're wondering why Gemerald is staying with Cream even though her story wasn't especially close in Sonic Battle with Emerald, I have to once again believe it's because of Sonic X. In that storyline, Cream is the one that gets pretty close to Emerald, and she's the one that has to put him out of commission at the end of that story arc, so she deserves it. Listen, all of this just fits into my Sonic X conspiracy, that's all I'm trying to say. But with that, we've dusted off the last of our tetralogy. I feel like I didn't really scratch the surface of Advance 3 that much, but it really is just a combination of Advance 1 and 2 with a really strong gimmick. Are there some annoying auto-scrolling sections? Yes. Did they finally fix enemies shooting you off screen? Yes. Wait, I might have undercooked the... No, those pits in those last two zones are pretty messed up. No, I didn't. It's the same. It's the same, but better. Especially if we're talking about something like the backgrounds, Sonic Advance has used the same color grading technique this whole series, and yet Advance 3 still somehow managed to make its background colors look richer and deeper and blend better, and I don't know how they do it. Like, Advance 1 isn't the best looking game, there's some iffy stuffs about it, but there's a bunch of technical know-how just thrown about, whether it be in the foreground or the background, and they just kept getting better, like some of the sprite scaling and weird camera angle stuff that they had to do in Sonic Battle. And these sprites are legendary. It's a style that's recognizable and referenced to this day. And the music overall is fantastic. Battle may have my favorite soundtrack, but my favorite singles come from SA3. They remixed Green Hill Zone and made it sound just as good. And Chaos Angel Act 1 coming out of a GBA, it's crazy. So yeah, I think all you need to do is re-release these games and zoom out the camera and you're pretty much golden. And while nothing is quite good enough to live up to the moniker of Sonic 4, these games are just as fantastic as the 2D classics before them and deserve to be preserved and available like the 2D classics before them. Do yourself a favor and give them a try. But until we meet again, matao, until we meet again.